So Alexa Philippou has been tweeting quite a few things about the WNBA CBA, and it is concerning. It is concerning. That is the word that I will use to describe all of this, is concerning, because it's looking less and less likely by the day that there's going to be a season. I still think there's going to be one, but
that word right there, concerning. That's the most diplomatic way to describe what's happening with WNBA CBA negotiations right now. Because as we're recording this, the League and Players Association just blew past their extension deadline, no deal, and the clock is ticking toward a potential work stoppage that could cancel the entire...
The Breanna Stewart says she's been told a new extension will not be agreed by tomorrow's deadline. Extension. But the expectations for the Players Association, WNBA, to continue to negotiate in good faith. That's mad. In this current scenario, the current CBA would expire. Both sides would enter a status quo period, which the conditions of the current CBA would be maintained, and the league and union would continue negotiating. It would open the door for a work stoppage, though.
So here's where we stand. Breanna Stewart has been told there will be no extension agreement by the deadline. Both sides say they'll continue negotiating in good faith. But once that current CBA expires, we enter what's called a status quo period. The conditions of the old agreement stay in place temporarily, but it opens the door for a work stoppage, and according to reporting from Alexa Philippou, the league has explicitly stated they're not considering a lockout, which means if games get cancelled, it's because the players walked out.
Extend CBA, league source believe both sides will get a deal done, and there will be a 2026 season. Too much at stake, games are missed, but we may not see a new CBA for a little while longer. The possibility of a super condensed off season is real. So my prediction is that I think or mid-March is when my prediction for CBA getting done, because mid-March gives them a week for everyone to get their shit together. It gives them 2 weeks for the expansion draft, or it gives them a week for the expansion draft. It gives them 2 weeks for free agency, and then we're into the draft. I get it.
Mid-March. That's the prediction for when this actually gets resolved. And that timeline makes sense when you break down what needs to happen. You need at least a week for teams to get their operations sorted. Another week for the expansion draft with Golden State and Toronto coming in. 2 weeks minimum for free agency. Then the WNBA draft. Anything past mid-March, and you're looking at a severely condensed offseason, where front offices are scrambling and players are making career decisions on a compressed schedule.
The longer this goes on, the less good it is. But at the same time, look, the longer it goes on, the more the players are going to get. So look, as long as we see, I don't care how long this drags out. I actually don't. As long as the players get as much as they can, and there's going to be a season. Like, it is one of those things where I'm like, you have to have a season. If there's no season, nothing matters. Nobody cares about Unrivaled. And I think...
But here's the calculation happening behind closed doors. The longer negotiations drag on, the more leverage shifts to the players, because the league cannot afford to miss games. Not after the Caitlin Clark effect drove ratings through the roof last season. Not with expansion fees already paid and new franchises ready to launch. Not with national TV deals and major sponsors locked in. The players know this. The question is whether they're willing to push that leverage all the way to the edge.
Players don't care. Outside of about 5 players, the players don't care. Paige Beckers literally said she was going to use Unrivaled to learn how to foul bait. The way the media is talking about it is that, oh, what are you going to try to add to your game in Unrivaled? Even the players don't take it seriously as a league. They don't take Unrivaled seriously as a league. Like that's something that people don't really understand. It's like the players do not take it seriously as a basketball league. They don't take the basketball part of Unrivaled seriously at all. And that is a problem. Like, people don't understand how important it is that the players take the basketball part of it seriously.
And that brings us to Unrivaled. Because there's been this narrative building that Unrivaled gives players a safety net. That if the WNBA season gets canceled, players can just make their money in this new 3-on-3 league and wait out the negotiations. But watch what happens when you actually examine that claim. Nobody cares about Unrivaled. Not the way they care about the WNBA. And more importantly, the players themselves don't take it seriously as competitive basketball.
They're using this as a camp. They're using this as a training camp off season. They're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to basically do off season training. Like, is it good that Unrivaled is the league? It allows the players to stay at home so that they can get workouts done. They don't have to go overseas. Yeah, Unrivaled is great. But we have to be real here. It's not basketball. And I think everybody involved knows it's not basketball, knows that Unrivaled is not going to gain, other than maybe Fee and Stewie. And even Stewie seems to be more positive. Other than Fee, it seems. Like, I remember in the Robin Lundberg, he was talking to Alex Basil, and he was like being adamant that it wasn't gimmick. Make sure that, you know, the words gimmick wasn't being used about Unrivaled. It is gimmick ball. It is not a real basketball.
Paige Bueckers literally said she was going to use Unrivaled to learn how to fail safe. That's not a player treating this like a real professional league. That's a player treating it like an expensive training camp. Kelsey Plum is out there throwing behind-the-back passes in her first game, experimenting with moves she'd never try in a WNBA game. These are professional athletes using Unrivaled as an off-season workout facility where they happen to get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is great for them. But it's not a substitute for the WNBA season, and everyone involved knows it.
Look, the reality is that if the season doesn't happen, it's done. One thing Stewie wondered, and she was clear note that she was just spitballing, was that if we had a condensed off-season, if players would decide once again to go to one-year deal route and kind of roll free agency into next year. There is a chance of that. And that makes sense. That makes sense.
The basketball quality in Unrivaled is not comparable to WNBA competition. A team's practice scrimmage is more competitive than what we're seeing in Unrivaled games. And you can tell by how the players approach it. They're not locked in the way they are during the WNBA season. They're loose. They're experimental. They're treating this like an exhibition. Robin Lombard was on a podcast with Alex Bazell being adamant that people shouldn't call Unrivaled a gimmick. But the problem is, when you watch the actual product, it plays out like gimmick basketball.
Someone said there's too much at stake. When Caitlin said it's an issue, it's Alexa Philippou. No other player said that, but like, everyone knows. Everyone knows. Caitlin Clark could say the grass is green, and someone will go, but what about in this specific city? In this specific city, the grass is actually not green because of something in the air. Caitlin Clark's a racist. Like we all know that they would jump to those conclusions. Like, as frustrating as the CBA has been, a condensed off season would be so much fun. Expansion draft, free agency, college draft, training camp, all in quick succession. Oh, like you better believe. Like,
now here's where this gets really important for CBA negotiations. If the WNBA season doesn't happen, Unrivaled doesn't save anybody. The league is done because Caitlin Clark is the only thing keeping Unrivaled remotely relevant. And even with her, the numbers are collapsing. Day 1 of Unrivaled Season 2 pulled just over 50,000 viewers in the key demographic. Last year's opener had over 100,000. That's a 50 to 60% drop. And if you lose Caitlin Clark, whether she decides not to play or her price doubles or triples, and suddenly Nike wants $2 million to keep her in their shoe, that league folds.
There's gonna be a season. There is going to be a season. I would be shocked, but every day the percentages slightly increase. As in, maybe a couple of days ago there was a 5% chance. Maybe now it's 6%, 7% chance of there not being a season. It's very, very, very unlikely that there's not a season. But there's always a possibility, and the longer this drags out, the greater that possibility is. But at least we have Stewie essentially doing, like, I'm not gonna lie, Stewie is doing damage control for the Nafisa Collier statement.
Which brings us to Nafisa Collier's comments that set this whole conversation off. She came out and said she knows what it takes to run Unrivaled. She knows what it takes to run a successful business. And the implication was clear. She thinks she understands what it takes to run the WNBA too. But here's the reality check. Unrivaled only exists because of outside investor money. Just like the WNBA only stayed afloat for years because of NBA subsidies. Breanna Stewart is essentially doing damage control for those comments now, trying to walk back the suggestion that running Unrivaled makes you qualified to negotiate a billion-dollar collective bargaining agreement. Because there's a fundamental problem with using Unrivaled as proof that players understand the business side. In 3 years, when the TV deals come up for renewal, when investors start looking for actual returns on their money instead of continuously pumping in capital, what happens? Caitlin Clark's price goes up. Paige Bucher's price goes up. Sponsorship costs increase. And if the league can't generate enough revenue to cover those rising costs without outside investment, it collapses. That's not a sustainable business model. That's a startup burning through venture capital, hoping to reach profitability before the money runs out. And every player involved should understand the difference between running a league that's subsidized by investors who expect returns versus negotiating with a league that's been subsidized by the NBA for decades and is finally approaching financial sustainability. The players deserve to get paid. Nobody's arguing against that, but the negotiation has to be grounded in reality. And the reality is that the WNBA's financial growth, as dramatic as it's been, is still fragile. One bad season, one injury to a marquee player, one ratings collapse, and suddenly the projections that justify those massive salary increases don't hold up anymore. Here's what makes this negotiation so precarious. The league's not considering a lockout, which means they're willing to keep negotiating indefinitely. But the players are considering a strike, which means at some point they might walk away from the table. And if that happens, if games actually get canceled, the damage to the league's momentum could be catastrophic. You don't get back the casual fans who tuned in because of Caitlin Clark. You don't get back the sponsors who committed based on last season's rating. You don't get back the media coverage that finally started treating the WNBA like a rager professional sport. Think about what the league has right now. Expansion into Golden State and Toronto. National TV deals with ESPN, CBS, and Amazon. Sold-out arenas for marquee matchup, mainstream sports media, actually covering games, social media engagement at all-time highs, players becoming household names, shoe deals and endorsement opportunities that didn't exist 5 years ago. All of that momentum, all of that progress, all of that cultural relevance, it's at risk if negotiations break down and games get canceled. And for what? Because here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud. If there's no WNBA season, there's no alternative league that gives these players anywhere close to the same platform, the same salaries, the same career opportunities. Overseas leagues pay well for top players, but they don't offer the visibility or the endorsement opportunity. Unrivaled pays well for a handful of stars, but it's not a sustainable career path, and everyone knows it. The WNBA is the only option that matters. The players have leverage right now because the league can't afford a work stoppage. But that leverage evaporates the moment games actually get canceled. Because then it becomes about who can hold out longer. And the league has deeper pockets than the players do. The league can survive a canceled season. It would be painful. It would set back progress. But the infrastructure would still exist. The players can't survive a canceled season. Their careers are too short. Their earning windows are too narrow. So when we talk about these negotiations dragging on into March, we need to understand what's actually happening. Both sides are posturing. The players are pushing for everything they can get, which is smart negotiating. The league is trying to protect long-term financial stability, which is responsible management. And somewhere in the middle, there's a deal that works for both sides. The question is whether they find it before the Brinksmanship turns into an actual work stoppage. My predictions stand. Mid-March, we get a deal. It'll be condensed, it'll be chaotic, front offices will be scrambling, but we'll have a season. Because at the end of the day, both sides need this more than they're willing to admit publicly. The league needs the momentum to continue. The players need the platform and the paychecks, and everyone involved understands that if they blow this opportunity, if they let the Caitlin Clark era get derailed by a labor dispute, they might never get this chance again. So watch what happens over the next few weeks. Watch whether the rhetoric escalates, or whether both sides start signaling compromise. Watch whether more players start speaking out publicly, or whether the union keeps negotiations private. Watch whether the league starts making contingency plans, or whether they remain confident a deal gets done. Because all of those signals will tell you whether we're actually headed toward a work stoppage, or whether this is just the normal brinksmanship that happens in every major sports negotiation. The WNBA has never been more relevant, never been more profitable, never had more opportunity in front of it. The question is whether the people negotiating this CBA understand what's at stake. Because if they mess this up, if they let egos and posturing and unrealistic demands blow up these negotiations, they won't just be canceling a season. They'll be canceling the best chance this league has ever had to become a permanent fixture in American sports culture.